I recently finished a mystery story where the sleuth was a restaurant inspector. Death comes to a restaurant being developed whose concept is, and the menu features, the last meals of famous people, or more accurately, infamous people. And obviously the author did her research and found some interesting tidbits. I'll leave off the names of who, but here are some of the requests that have been granted in recent years for someone's last meal. One woman wanted fried chicken, peas with butter, apple pie, and a Dr. Pepper. Someone else asked for 12 fried shrimp, a bucket of original recipe KFC, French fries, and 1 pound of strawberries. One man only wanted 2 pints of chocolate chip mint ice cream. And then there are the odd choices. One man asked for a single olive with a pit in it. And his thinking was that it might grow into an olive tree from inside his body, and it would also make use of him as a symbol of peace. Another requested lobster tail, steak, apple pie, vanilla ice cream, and oh yes, to eat it all while watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So in case you're wondering, the traditional last meal consists of steak, medium rare, eggs, over easy, hash browns, toast with butter and jelly, milk and juice. And I'm sure you're already thinking, what would I ask for if I knew it was my last meal? It about makes you want to salivate over all the possibilities. And there's always room for one more item on the list. The meal is about favorites. What's the yummiest thing you can think of to eat? Today is Holy Communion Sunday. We call it the Lord's Supper or the Last Supper. It was Jesus' last meal on earth. And in Matthew's account, Jesus tells his disciples, I will not drink wine again until the day I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. At the table we are told to do this often in remembrance of Jesus and that Last Supper, till we are all together again in God's kingdom, seated with Jesus to share in it once again. In Mark's Gospel, we come to Passover and the Festival of the Unleavened Bread. And we jump back to Leviticus to learn when Passover starts. At sundown, on the 14th day of the first month of the Hebrew calendar, so typically late March or April. And then the Festival of the Unleavened Bread begins on the 15th day and continues for 7 more days. And during that time, bread is made without yeast, as a reminder that the Israelites did not have time to wait for the yeast to do its work, making the dough rise. It was time to flee from Pharaoh, and time was precious. The Passover meal was an act of remembrance, and it still is today. It's a time for the Jewish community to remember their history, to remember how God was with them, bringing them out of the land of Egypt and into the land promised to them and their ancestors. So let's talk food. The ceremonial Passover meal is called a Seder. Foods are prepared, liturgy is spoken, and the traditional responses and actions are carried out. And my resource of information is a little book I have called A Passover Haggadah. The table is made ready, leaving an empty chair as a reminder of those who are in places that do not celebrate Passover in freedom. At each place setting, there's a wine glass, prepared horseradish and salt water, which is used for the dipping of parsley and green herbs. There's also half of a hard-boiled egg, which may also be sitting in a dish of salt water. And of course, matzah, the bread. There are 3 separate pieces of matzah. and they are placed in a special cloth, often folded so they don't touch. Two of the matzah represent the two traditional loaves that are set out on the temple during the festival days. And the third one is to symbolize Passover. On the table, there's also a roasted shank bone of lamb, and it's either burned or scorched to represent the Passover sacrifice. The parsley or green herbs represent the growth of springtime, the green of hope and renewal. The top part of the horseradish root is to represent the bitterness felt by their forefathers and for those today who are oppressed. The roasted egg represents the festival offering, the symbol of life itself. Life triumphed over death. And prominently placed on the table is a special cup filled with wine to represent how Elijah, the herald or the prophet of redemption, at some time during the Seder, visits every Jewish home and tastes the cup set aside for him. And so at some point during the meal, a child will go to the door and open it for Elijah, giving a sense of mystery, breathless anticipation, and hope. So did you hear any similarities of the Passover meal with our table used for Holy Communion? The Jewish community celebrates the Passover meal to remember all that God has done for them in their history. And we come to the table to remember all that God has done for us through Jesus Christ. The two faith traditions overlap in history. And while the Jewish community continues to wait for the Messiah, the Christian community acknowledges Jesus as the fulfillment of God's promise. In a sense, as the two traditions overlap, our table overlaps too. The matzah, or bread, the cup of wine, or grape juice. And each time we come to the table, we remember not only Jesus, but all of our history back to in the beginning. And we too wait with breathless anticipation. What will the mystery do next? In Mark's record, the disciples ask, "What do you want us to do about the Passover meal?" And Jesus gives them specific instructions which they follow. They meet the man with a pitcher of water, follow him to the upper room, and when they get there, everything was ready. When I come back to the church after a funeral, the meal is always ready. And I know there was much done from the planning and the cooking to the setting of the tables, and it was all taken care of. And sometimes I worry and pray for those who do so much to prepare a meal that they'll have an opportunity to just sit down and enjoy the food and the time for conversation without worrying about all that needs to be done to clean up afterward. But for some reason, it's a comforting thought. The disciples came to the upper room, and it was ready. Each first Sunday of the month, we come to the table, and it is ready. Lovingly prepared for you. To once more hear the words of Jesus, "Do this to remember me," before he went to the cross. To eat the bread that gives life, to drink from the cup of forgiveness, gives those words, the Last Supper, new meaning, hope, and joy. Maybe we should think of it as the last time we need to ask for forgiveness of our past, the last time to think of impure thoughts about one another, the last time we speak out of turn. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ washes, covers, and cleanses us all. And Jesus used the common elements of bread and wine to share his last meal with us. Food that is already on the table. So let's come to the Lord's table and remember Jesus.